Welcome to SewVeryEasy. My name is Laura, and pre-cut packages are a lot of fun to use because all of the fabric is going to match, so we do not have to try to match up fabrics. Sometimes we need to add a background fabric to make whatever we want to make a little bit bigger. But other than that, all of the fabrics match for us. So it's taken all the guesswork out of it. So it doesn't matter where those pieces are going to go, it's going to match. Well, I have found a free pattern from Moda, and it makes a quilt top. And that quilt top can be made with the little 2.5-inch squares, 5-inch squares, or the big 10-inch squares. The choice is all up to you. For me, I'm going to be using the 5-inch squares. So this quilt can be made in 3 different ways. The construction is the same. It's what we're going to start with, which makes the difference. This quilt is 72 inches square, and we start with a layer cake, and that's the 10-inch squares of fabric. The same quilt can be made with these 5-inch charm packs. We need 1 charm pack, which is 42 squares, and it will equal a 32-inch square when we're done. If we like those nice little mini charm packs, which are 2.5-inch squares, we will also need 1 charm pack, and we will end up with a little quilt 12-inch square. So for today, I am going to use a charm pack and make the quilt 32-inch square. This free pattern is from Moda, and I am going to be using Moody Bloom. What we're going to need to go along with one of these packs will be background fabric. I'm going to need 16 4.5-inch squares and 18 5-inch squares with a line drawn from corner to corner. This is as easy as choosing 18 fabrics from our charm pack, matching so the right sides are together. We have that line drawn from corner to corner. Now we need to stitch a 1/4 inch from each side. The space that I left is a scant 1/4 inch from that line. So I have 2 lines of stitching right down the center. I'll be able to cut those apart right on that line. Once those are cut apart, we need to trim the half square triangles to 4.5 inches. Once those 36 4.5-inch half square triangles are done, we're going to match them up with background fabrics and our solid squares. Our half square triangles are 4.5 inches, so we will need to trim up 12 of our charm squares to 4.5 inches. The pattern does have the quilt going together in rows. There are a few other options on putting this together. We could put it together in quarters. So we will have 4 of these corners that are going to fit together. If we're going to do the quarters, we will be able to take time and sort of match up our fabrics so we have 4 corners that are going to be the same. So the first thing we might want to do is this center square. So we're going to need 4 half square triangles. So I have chosen 2 that have a high contrast. The next piece, if we look at it, is this star point. I really wanted that star point to pop, so I made those half square triangles in the darkest fabric that they had. From there, we can look at these corner units, and we can choose our fabric for this one piece right here. And then we will have 4 that will look like this. So I'm just going to lay them out. I'm not going to sew them yet. So I have the 4 for the center. Now I need to add that star, which I've chosen the darker colors. So I'm going to be able to lay out those darker ones all the way around. The corners are going to be filled in with 4.5-inch background fabrics. So this is the complete center. I can now add my tulip blocks and the center blocks. I did go through the pile and found 2 fabric squares that were the same. So I was able to make these 4 half square triangles. So we have these arrows on each side. These arrows are going to go all the way around. From here, I just need to add those corner blocks. So before I cut my 5-inch squares to 4.5, I choose which ones I like first. So I'm going to lay out my 4 tulip corners. Choosing the fabrics and cutting the fabrics for individual portions gives this quilt not so much of a scrappy look. It does have some flow to it. I was able to get fabrics that were matching for my arrows. I color-coded the corners, and that way you can really see these tulip corners. And I do like to look at it first before I sew any pieces together. It's really easy at this point to swap out a piece for another one than it is after I've sewn it together. From here, we can sew this together in rows, but I'm going to sew them together in halves. So I'm going to have 4 corners. I find this is a little bit more manageable to bring to my machine. I use these boards and these little canvases you can get at craft stores, even at dollar stores now. So I'm going to be able to transfer this right over. And by transferring it over, this is definitely going to be a lot easier for me to bring to my sewing machine. When I finish this one corner, I'll put it in place and then pick up the next corner, put it on the board, bring it to the machine and sew it. So I will do all 4 corners this way. And that way they all stay right in the order that I wanted them to stay in. Once the 4 corners are done, I'm going to be able to sew this together. Now, of course, we can always add borders onto it and make it larger. This would make a beautiful center of a quilt. But if we want to make it just a little bit bigger, we do happen to have 12 squares left over, which means we can put 3 on each corner. We will need long side strips cut at 24.5 inches, and then we can cut these extra blocks to 4.5 inches and put them on the corner. So that's going to make it just a little bit bigger, and we get to use up the entire charm pack. That extra border really did finish it off nicely. So this has been a great pattern using up 5-inch squares. Or if you'd like, you could use 2.5-inch squares or the 10-inch squares. The only difference is going to be the size. The quilt top is now done. The great thing about using pre-cut bundles, regardless if they're 2 inches, 5 inches, 10 inches, all of the fabrics are going to match. Now, if you get an opportunity to match some, that's always fun too, but you really don't need to. We have a background that matches all of the fabrics. It could be the soft white, or it could have been a dark blue, a red, lots of colors you can use as a solid color background, and it's really going to change the look of it. And all we needed was one of those packages of fabric and the background fabric. I'll put a link in the description to the free pattern and the fabric that I used. And thank you for joining me today on Sew Very Easy. Feel free to subscribe and come on back. Let's see what we're working on next time in the sewing room. Bye for now.